Hey guys, how's everyone doing today? David Michael from Bhaivav Healing. Welcome to the first episode of the Bhaivav Healing Podcast. I wanted to make a podcast because some of my social media posts were a bit long-winded, and I do feel like the topics that I discuss, which is psychedelic integration, psychedelic experience, spirituality, cult deprogramming, sort of deserves a little bit more of a long format. I have difficulty wrapping it up into like 1 or 2 minute sound bites for social media. So I thought that making a podcast would be a good way for me to just kind of get it all out, and then I could sort of chop it up and put it up when I want to. But also for you guys, if you want to like go a little deeper with this, into this with me, go a little deeper into this with me. And we can do like a half hour or 45 minutes at a clip, and that will kind of give you a broader perspective on who I am and what I'm doing it and why I'm doing it. So let's just jump into it right now. I guess I should introduce myself and kind of talk a little bit about myself, which is like my favorite subject and my least favorite subject. So my name is David Michael. I have been working with plant medicine for about 12 years now. I'm a former opiate addict, and plant medicine really, really helped me to get sober and stay sober. As a byproduct, I had quite a few very interesting mystical experiences by working with the plants, which is not abnormal if you're familiar with these substances. And those happened very quickly in the beginning, which led me on this path of studying different forms of spirituality, different religions, different dharmas. I was a brahmacharya monk for a couple of years. That's a Hindu monk specializing in the branch of Hinduism that I was studying was Advaita Vedanta, which is a non-dualistic system. Through my study of Advaita Vedanta, I had also studied Kashmiri Shaivism, Shaktiism, Mahayana Buddhism, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, lots of isms. I studied and practiced Sikhism for a couple of years, or Sikhi as it's properly called. And what I've kind of come to the conclusion is that all of these things say the same thing at the end of the day. And I truly believe that we are all connected. I truly believe that we are all part of one big thing. And my main practice right now, and what has been for the past almost 10 years, is bhakti. Bhakti means different things to different people. For me, what it means is the service of devotion. And when I say service, I don't mean like kissing the foot of a guru, as this podcast goes on. We'll get into my disdain of guruship and spiritual leadership and all of that sort of thing. But for me, bhakti is basically just serving the higher power through serving other people. Like I said previously, I have a pretty good idea that everything is connected. I mean, these are the experiences that I've had through plant medicine, but also, I've done a lot of studying of quantum physics. If you could ask me to do the math, I would say absolutely not. But I do have a pretty good understanding, I think, of the philosophy of it, of what the math points to. And that is that there is only one thing, and that we are all connected to it. So for me, my bhakti normally comes in the form of serving people food, or working in volunteering in food kitchens here in San Francisco. I've also done that all across the country. I've done it in rural Virginia. I worked on a free food truck with Hare Krishnas in Baltimore City. I've done work up in Sonoma County, California, with the kitchens and the San Francisco Marin Food Bank. And I just find that feeding people is my love language. It's something that I really, really feel passionate about doing. And that is how I serve people, which is my form of bhakti. I've also had the sort of ability, and we'll get into like story time also on this podcast. I've had some interesting experiences over the past couple of decades of my life, and I've been on the fringes of various, sort of spiritual groups. I would call them cults. And I've had the opportunity to see how a couple of them operate. And what really is heartbreaking to me is that I've met a lot of really, really well-intentioned, well-meaning people seeking something bigger than themselves, and they get ensnared in the quicksand of these groups, and very quickly they lose everything, and they're sort of forced into this position of servitude within these groups. And it really kind of just breaks my heart, because these groups are very, very, very good at breaking people down, taking away from them, and then ultimately making these people subservient. And before they even know it, they've lost friends and family and possessions and money and the ability to disentangle themselves from it, because it becomes your entire social structure. I've seen this in Eastern-based religions. I've seen this in Christian-based religions. I've seen this in the plant medicine communities, yoga cults, like you name it. I've kind of dipped my toe in to see what's going on, and I have a pretty clear view now of how these things operate. And my real passion is helping people to untangle from it, to get back into their lives, and to understand that what they were seeking was always inside of them. I've also done a lot of work with plant medicine, both as a researcher, an explorer, and a facilitator of plant medicine journeys. And I have, maybe a little bit of a different perspective on these things than a lot of other people do, my peers. I have a sort of a controversial view that I'm not a fan of the groups, ayahuasca groups or plant medicine groups in general. I have found through my own experience and through helping other people, guiding other people through these experiences, that doing it alone, with someone who you feel safe with there to kind of watch over you, but not within a group setting or even within a couple situation, like a partnership, that the most bang for your buck is when you do it alone. After you've done it a couple of times, and maybe your partner's done it a couple of times, you could try it together and see what happens. But I feel like it gets very sloppy and very messy when there's more than one person involved in the actual journey. And I've also found that it sort of opens the door to potential abuse by, again, let's just call them what they are, cult leaders or wannabe cult leaders. They're a dime a dozen in the plant medicine community. And I have some stories from my time in Los Angeles, up in Topanga Canyon, and, kind of being invited to a couple of these things and really seeing what the deal is. So again, that's kind of controversial. And honestly, I think the reason why it is controversial is because you can make a lot more money guiding a group of people than just one person. I'm not saying that all of the plant medicine guidance should be free of charge. I think that there is a skill set involved there. And I think that, a fair price or a sliding scale for people who, need that is fair and important for both parties. But when it gets taken advantage of, when people are charging $15,000 for a retreat for a weekend, or, there's 10, 12 people in a group and 2 people facilitating, that's really big money. You could walk away with $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for a weekend, as opposed to, I don't know, $500, something like that. And that is a huge difference, right? And I have seen that time and time and time again. So again, I don't like the big groups. I don't think that you can really get what you need from it other than just having the journey. If you're with 10 or 12 people, that's 10 or 12 different energies that are flying around that room. And how can you be sure of what you're experiencing is even yours? It could be the person next to you or the person across from you. And then at the end of the weekend, you're kind of like left on your own. You're kind of kicked out and into the world, and like, hey, thanks. If you want to do a ceremony again, that'll be another $10,000. And the ceremony itself is actually the smallest part. The biggest part is the integration that comes afterwards. Like, how you use the information that you were given to change your life in a better way, to make yourself a better person, to make yourself whatever it is, whatever your intention was at the beginning of that. How do you make that actually happen, right? And that in and of itself takes work. It's not a weekend experience. It oftentimes, sometimes it could take a year or two. I'm still unpacking some of the information that I received 10 years ago, and as my life progresses and as things come up in my life, I can kind of go back to those touchstones and say, okay, like I see that now. So how can I shift that? It's not something easy or quick. And I feel like a lot of times with plant medicine, it's sold as this easy, quick therapy, like 10 years of therapy in 8 hours. You hear that all the time. And to a certain extent, yes. But what do you do with the therapy? Do you just sit on it? Do you just go back every weekend to revisit it? Or do you put it into your life? You put the energy in motion so that you can change in the way in which you want to change. With my company, Bhaivav Healing, I offer basically to hold space for someone who has had a very challenging experience, a quote unquote bad trip, which I don't think is really the apt name for the experience that's challenging. I wouldn't call it a bad trip. That's just sort of what people, call it. Because the most difficult experiences are normally the most rewarding, have the most information, and have the potential to be the most healing. But a lot of times people don't get that from the facilitators they go to and don't really know where to start after that. So I just sort of open up the space for them. I listen. I give them some advice. I give them some stories about my own experiences that maybe I can connect with them and sort of help them see things in a different way. And, my main goal is for them to not have to continue to see me after a couple of times, like to really kind of be comfortable with what they experienced, whether it was challenging or confusing, and be able to move forward confidently and be good. I'm not looking for long-term clients. I'm not looking for a ton of money and power and to be some sort of leader. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to use my own experience as a touchboard and be as compassionate and patient as understanding as possible, and help people to understand that they're not alone, that these experiences are really common, and that, the real difficulty lies in integrating them. And that's the most important part. And how do you do that? How do you get into that headspace? What resonates with you? What is going to be a more grounding presence in your life on a day-to-day basis after having these very unusual and highly mystical type experiences? So I'm pretty excited to get this started. I'm pretty excited to help people to find their footing after they've had a challenging experience or a confusing experience, and to be maybe just like another voice of reason to help ground them a little bit and get them back onto, solid ground. Help them understand that there are other people in the world that have experienced this, and that they're not crazy or they're not schizophrenic, and they don't have to go into psychosis. They can just sort of gently and gradually process these experiences to help them be the best person that they can be. So my sort of touchstone with psychedelics came in my late 30s. I had done a lot of drugs at that point, but I had never used psychedelics. And I was having a real hard time with opiates and benzos at that time. And this would be, 2010, 2011, 2012-ish. And one day I was at work, and I worked in this sort of cool men's clothing store. I was a manager, and we used to get Vice magazine to give out to customers. And I was in the back, and I was withdrawing, and I was feeling terrible, and I was just kind of trying to, distract myself. So I was reading Vice magazine, and there was an article in there about how psychedelics are being used to treat addiction. And as a byproduct of that, people were having these mystical experiences or seeing God, or, however you want to frame it. That really resonated with me at that time. I felt very low. I felt like I couldn't carry on with this monkey on my back called addiction. And, I've always been prone to mystical experiences. I've had lots of encounters with like ghosts and things like that as a kid. And, I think part of my addiction was trying to push that away, because it was kind of scary and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to frame it. I thought I was crazy. So I would take these pills and, those things wouldn't happen. They would go away. And, I also had a whole host of unresolved childhood traumas and things like that I hadn't even remembered some of them. So a couple months later, I was thinking about this article that I had read, and I didn't even know I could get any drug in the city except for psychedelics. I had no idea where to get psychedelics. And I wasn't even a big cannabis user at the time because I've never been a smoker. And where I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, back in the 90s, cannabis was smoked. There wasn't a dispensary to go to. There were no gummies or edibles or anything like that. So when I moved to San Francisco, someone had given me a brownie or a cookie or something like that, and I had a very strange experience on it. And, I sort of knew that cannabis had this ability to put me in a different state of mind than, it was like the opposite of being numbed out, which was like the opiates and the benzos would do. But I didn't explore it too deeply. And honestly, I stopped using it for a while because it didn't really work well with the pills, and I would get restless leg syndrome and get very irritated. So I stopped using cannabis as well. So I started using cannabis again, and really tried to cut down on my pill usage. And I was starting to lose weight, and I just was getting a good night's sleep. That was the one thing that cannabis was great for. Was I had insomnia my entire life, and cannabis would help me to sleep. It was like a godsend when I found it. So I was familiar with that sort of thing, with the cannabis, and out of nowhere, I came across these guys who were talking about psilocybin chocolates. And again, I didn't know anything about psychedelics. I had done zero research. I just knew that they were supposed to help with addiction. That's literally all I knew. I didn't know anything about set or setting or guidance or, what receptors they attach to in my brain. I didn't know anything. So I was talking to these guys, and I was like, hey, where do you get these chocolates? Where can I get one? And they were like, oh, you know what? We'll bring some back next time we come over. I was like, okay, great. So they brought these 2 chocolates that were wrapped in foil, and I had no idea what to do with them. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I kind of just went into this archetypal, psychedelic thing where I think I put on I don't know, Pink Floyd The Wall or something, which I'm not even a Pink Floyd fan. And I ate one of these chocolates and just kind of waited for something to happen. And I had the experience of, complete unity, of ego death, of being God, of, that whole thing, that whole really deep experience. It also showed me a couple of the reasons why I was in such pain and why felt I needed to use painkillers. It showed me a couple of deep childhood wounds, and it allowed me the space to actually process them without too much judgment on myself. So the next day I felt like $1 million. I felt like I had I was an Aztec warrior, I had gone through this initiation process, which in some ways it very much was. And, I don't like to, as a white man of Irish and Scottish descent and Polish descent, I don't like to use words like shaman and, sort of vision quests and stuff like that. But I think every culture has something like that, back in the day. And certainly being of a Celtic descent, the Irish and the Scottish had things like that as well. But that's how I felt. I felt very strong. I felt very in tune with the world. I felt very connected. And one of the big driving forces in that journey was I saw a lot of Hindu deities, and I didn't know anything about Hinduism. I had not studied anything. I knew there was an elephant-headed guy and a monkey-headed guy, and but I didn't know anything. I was raised Catholic, so I thought maybe I would see Jesus or Mary or Saint Michael or something like that. But I didn't. I saw Hanuman and the Ganesh and Kali and Krishna, and the sort of closing, moments of this journey for me, I was instructed to learn how to meditate, which I threw myself directly into. So within a couple of days, I had stopped eating meat. I've been a lifetime meat eater. I stopped drinking caffeine, and I stopped using opiates. And I did have a little bit of a physical withdrawal for sure, but for me, trying to stop opiates in the past, it was way, way, way more of an emotional withdrawal. That's what killed me. The depression, the crying, all of the stuff coming to the surface that I didn't understand. That was the worst. So after kind of going through the physical withdrawals, which only lasted a couple of days, which I was really surprised about, I was done. I did not use opiates anymore. I did not use benzos anymore. And I realized that this molecule, psilocybin, was a fucking miracle. Like, this was not a recreational drug. And I was so glad that I had never used psychedelics when I was younger, because a lot of my friends did. I grew up in the 90s, and a lot of my friends took LSD and would go to raves. And, I just never... I saw a couple people have bad trips and freak out, and I was like, that doesn't look like fun at all. I don't want to do that. So I was really thankful that I had never done it as a kid recreationally, because I don't know if it would have worked the same on me if I had. I feel like that I was like, at that point in my life, I was ready for the change, and that was the change that I needed. So of course I went off and, just started screaming from the rooftops what a great thing psilocybin was. And I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people make after their first experience, especially because I wasn't guided. I didn't know anything about anything. And I just started talking about it to everyone. And some people got it, of course, but a lot of people didn't. And one thing that I've learned from the psychedelic experience and my own personal psychedelic experiences is that the information that you receive during your journey is for you. It's not for the world. Even if you were giving some crazy insight about what's going to happen, it's not a great idea to get on the rooftop and scream about it, because more often than not, like Yoda says in Star Wars, always in motion the future is. Things can change, things can shift. And then you're looking like the guy that's saying, oh, aliens are going to be here 2022, 2025, 2027. They never come, right? That's kind of what will happen. Also, you can have the experience of like being a Messiah figure, being Jesus or Krishna or whatever, right? You're not the savior. You're not the Messiah. You're your own Messiah. You're being shown that is what you're capable of for yourself, so that you can be a better version of yourself, and then maybe inspire other people to do that through your actions. But a lot of people will see themselves as Jesus, and then the next morning they're running around telling everyone that they're Jesus, that they're the Messiah, that they get a complex, and then they start a cult. And that there is a very distinguished line that you could follow into a darkness if you allow yourself to get wrapped into that, which is another big part of my integration. I really believe in kind of like grounding, helping people to ground themselves, so that they understand that these things were meant for them, for their own well-being, for their own betterment, and not necessarily for the betterment of all of humanity in the way in which you're going to get up and just scream it to everyone. But it is better for humanity if you integrate these lessons and become a better human being. Because when you become a better human being, the people around you will see that you have changed. And if even one or two of them say, you know what, that guy used to be a fucking mess, and if he can change, maybe I can too, then that's a score. That's a win. You don't need a giant group following you around thinking you're some guru or something. Like, believe me, man, that's more trouble than it's worth, and it gets messy. You can't do that in a clean way. I've never seen it done in a clean way. But working with your own ego, working with your own gifts, your own creativity, your own imagination, finding joy in small things, being able to serve and help people without any want of reciprocity. Like, these are all really great things. These are the things that like the saints did, and the guys in the Vedas and the rishis and things like that. Like, they were about that life. They were about helping people. They were about like changing the world through being a better person in their own immediate environment and inspiring others to do the same. And I really feel strongly about that. I think that oftentimes we get caught up, especially on social media, and seeing these, the social media makes the world look very small, but it's not. This world is massive. It's a giant place. I have traveled a lot. I have been back and forth across this country multiple times over the past couple of years. And just the United States alone is massive. Just the state of Oklahoma, driving from one side to the other, is massive. There's so much land there, so many different kinds of people. And, I really think that starting off in your own community, in your own household, like being of service there, being of service in your town, in your school district, like however that looks to you, that's really the way to go. Trying to be some kind of famous, over the top, personality on social media that has all the answers because they took a little bit of psilocybin generally will go down in flames at some point. And I'm telling you, as someone who's made these mistakes, I did all of that. I thought I was Jesus. I told people that I was the Messiah and that, I did all this stuff myself. So I'm not like calling anyone out other than myself when I'm telling these stories. And I will tell these stories very honestly and with as much humor as possible, because looking back on it now, even though I'm slightly embarrassed, I think it's kind of funny. And if you can't laugh at yourself and learn from your own mistakes that way, I don't know. What's the joy in life? You know what I mean? So anyway, guys, that's just sort of an introduction to what I'm going to be talking about. And I'll be posting these clips. If you're a social media friend of mine, you can see these little bits on social media. But thanks for tuning in for this short half hour. And if you guys have any ideas of what you want me to talk about in the future, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll just continue to tell stories from my own experiences. And we will go from there. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon.